Greetings. This is the first of many occasions we'll be meeting like this. Welcome to Introduction to Logic. I'm Dr. Bass. I'll be your guide through the course of this semester. Now, logic is basically just the art of thinking, the art and science of thinking clearly. During this semester, we're going to spend a good bit of time talking about logic, but for tonight, I just want to cover some basics about the textbook, about what will be in the course, and about how to think about arguments. Here are some of the basics. You'll want to begin with the syllabus. It's online on Blackboard under Course Documents. Now, it's not written in stone, and we may have minor adjustments, slight changes, and so forth. Nevertheless, it contains important information about the course, so please do take a look. For now, let me mention some highlights. The first, of course, is that you need the textbook. This will be The Power of Logic, the 4th edition, by the Howard Snyders, that's Francis and Daniel, and by Ryan Wasserman. It should look something like this. At least, it should look something like this if you're used to looking at things in low-resolution, grainy JPEGs. Here's some of what you'll need to do for success in this course. It's all pretty basic and obvious. First, you need to read the assignments carefully. It may be a good idea when you're reading assignments to read over them more than once and take notes. You need to listen to the lectures also carefully. You'll have these available so you can play them again. You need to participate in the discussion forum thoughtfully, interacting with other members of the class. And finally, you'll need to do well on the quizzes, homework, and tests. You may ask, how do I do well on these? How do I make sure that I do well on them? Well, the answer to that deserves a separate point. The most basic when it comes to studying logic is practice, practice, practice. Let me tell you a story. In my undergraduate work, I took a logic course. I thought I was a pretty logical guy. I can't say that I tried very hard. I didn't do a lot of studying or a lot of practice. And I got something out of it, maybe. Perhaps I got a B in the course. I don't remember at this point. But anyhow, I took the course, and I know now that I didn't get anywhere near as much out of the course as I could have. The reason I know that is because since then, I took a graduate logic course. Now, the graduate logic course, as you might imagine, was more demanding. What it did was it pushed me to actually do the practicing, the hard work, that I hadn't done the first time around. What I found was I spent lots of time working on it, practicing. I spent probably an hour or more a day practicing. And I found out something. The practice really paid off. It burned those patterns of reasoning into my brain. It seemed, after I had gone through that course, I've told people this, it seemed as if I had a new sense. It seemed as if I suddenly had X-ray vision. I could see patterns of reasoning, patterns of thinking in what people said, sometimes good and sometimes bad, but I could see them in a way that I had never been able to before. The overwhelming value of a course in logic, to me, it was one of the great intellectual experiences of my life. I learned to think better, and that has affected a great deal else that I have done. I encourage you Don't skimp on the practice. That is what will make the difference between doing well and not doing well in this course. Now, we're going to go on, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about some basic ideas about argument before we get back to the material in the textbook. This would be a good time to check out Monty Python's sketch, The Argument Clinic, and then come back here to continue. Or perhaps you want to go on and check out the film later. Either way, don't miss it. If we're all back together now, the sketch will give you some good ideas about what argument isn't, as well as a pretty good definition of argument. I'll spend a bit more time on what argument is not, with special attention to some common meanings I want to avoid. There's nothing wrong with these meanings in general, it's just they're not the meaning that will be important for this class. So for the purposes of this class, I want you to wipe them out of your mind. First, argument is not quarreling. It's not about who did the dishes last or who forgot the cable bill. It's not the, I had an argument with my parents / girlfriend / spouse / roommate kind of thing. Second, it's not abuse. It's not insulting people or calling them names or making them feel bad. Third, it's not merely making a claim. Sometimes people will say, I will argue that, or my argument is, and then they follow up with a statement of their opinion. What they're really doing is making a claim. They're expressing their belief. But they're not in the sense that philosophers use the term, making an argument. None of these is what we mean when we talk about arguments in philosophy. There are also some things that argument may be, but doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be or turn into a shouting match. In fact, that generally gets in the way of real argument. It also doesn't have to be rude. It can be courteous and polite. It doesn't have to be competitive, characterized by one-upmanship or winners and losers. It doesn't have to be something that's emotionally high temperature. People don't have to get angry, be upset, or get irate. Even if these things happen sometimes, they're not essential to argument. So I don't want you to be thinking about or assuming any of these things when we talk about arguments. Now, I've said a good bit about what argument isn't. I like to talk about what argument is. An argument is a group of reasons designed to support a conclusion. Now that's important. Let me repeat it. An argument is a group of reasons designed to support a conclusion. An argument is good, or strong, or powerful, to the extent that the reasons given actually do support the conclusion. On the other hand, an argument is bad, or weak, or defective, or insufficient if the reasons given fail to support the conclusion. Take a look at that again. An argument is a group of reasons designed to support a conclusion. But things that are designed to do something don't necessarily do a good job. They may fall short. There are three basic ways that an argument can go wrong. First, an argument may fail to provide support. For example, it's true because I dreamed it. Unless you're trying to support a conclusion about your dreams, dreaming something isn't a reliable way of finding out things. Second, the reasons given may not be true. You may remember from history classes the story of the Watergate scandal. After Republican Party operatives were caught breaking into Democratic Party offices, there were suspicions that the trail led all the way to the White House. But Richard Nixon went on national television to say he had no involvement. I didn't know about it. I didn't authorize it. I had nothing to do with it. I am not a crook. If you think about it, those are pretty good reasons, if they're true. The problem is that they were not. As it eventually came out, Nixon was involved in planning and authorizing the break-in, and also heavily involved in trying to cover it up later. Third, this is a bit more subtle. An argument may depend on some claim that wouldn't be accepted by someone on the other side. To get the point here, you have to imagine an actual context where one person is presenting an argument to someone else. To illustrate, imagine that you believe abortion is not wrong, and I come to you trying to convince you otherwise.
I tell you that the Pope says abortion is wrong, and the Pope is infallible, which means he can't be wrong about something like that. If those are true, and they might be, they would provide very good reasons for the conclusion. If the Pope says abortion is wrong, and he can't be mistaken, well then, abortion must be wrong. So why shouldn't you be convinced? The answer is that if you don't believe abortion is wrong, you probably don't believe the Pope is infallible either. Even if the Pope really is infallible, you wouldn't have a good enough reason to believe abortion is wrong, because the argument doesn't take off from something you already believe. In general, the process of persuasion is the process of building a bridge of reasons that leads from where a person is to where you want them to be. In order to do that, you have to build the bridge all the way to where the other person is. Otherwise, it won't help them get across the gap. And what that means is that arguments have to be based on shared beliefs or knowledge or assumptions, or you have to do a little more filling in to get them to accept your initial assumptions. When you overlook this point, when you offer an argument where the other person doesn't accept the same basic assumptions or background knowledge, the problem with the argument is called begging the question, or circular reasoning. And in general, arguing, the activity, is the process of supporting conclusions with reasons. Now, you may not be in the habit of thinking that much of your life has to do with argument, but I think it does. When you think about argument in the way we've been talking about here, supporting conclusions with reasons, it's part of everyday life. When you say, I've got an early class, so I'd better set my alarm. Or I've got an early class, so I'd better not stay up late. Those are arguments. When you consider what to major in and why, you're engaging in argument. When you try to select the best career, decide who to vote for, or who not to, you're engaging in argument. From the most trivial issues to the most profound, in the sense of supporting conclusions with reasons, argument is how we guide our lives. Earlier, I mentioned a number of negatives of arguments, things that might be associated with it, and said these are things argument doesn't have to be. I'd like to counterbalance that with some positives, some things that argument may be, even if it doesn't have to be. First, arguing or considering an argument may be carried out by yourself in just thinking through an issue, what you care about, what matters to you. For example, whether to take a job or join the Peace Corps. When you do that, you're considering arguments. That's one of the reasons argument doesn't have to be competitive or contentious. Sometimes there's nobody else there to compete or contend with. Second, of course, it may be carried out with others. But even with others, arguing may be cooperative, something carried out in trying to figure out together what's true or right or reasonable. You can imagine a group of friends planning to go out to lunch. One suggests the Mexican restaurant. Somebody else mentions the poor service the last time he went. After a bit of back and forth, a bit of presenting reasons in support of conclusions, everybody agrees on something that's at least more or less satisfactory to all. That's on a small, everyday scale, but there are larger scale versions too. Couples have to plan their lives together. Communities reach mutual accommodations. The electorate of a nation has to think about what they want to be as a nation and a society, how they want to conceive of themselves, and how they want to act in the world. I certainly wouldn't deny that there's room for contention in cases like these, but there's also, I think, something else, or at least there can be. We are reasoning together about what to do. Third, and most important, at least when it's honest, argument may be an expression of respect for others. Now, sometimes it doesn't feel like that. If someone is arguing with you, presenting reasons in support of a conclusion, but the conclusion she's arguing for is that you are mistaken about some dearly held belief, that may not feel very comfortable. Respect may not be the first word that comes to mind. I'd like to suggest that it should come to mind. Maybe not first, but it should be there. Think about how it is when someone is trying to persuade you to some conclusion by argument. First, they're implying that you're worth persuading. They're regarding you as a person of intelligence and good judgment. They're not just manipulating you or trying to manipulate you, the way advertisers and politicians often do, trying only to punch your buttons so you give them whatever response they want, your dollars or your vote or whatever. That's not what argument is. Also, argument is not coercive. Someone who takes the time and trouble to argue with you isn't making you go along. They're not holding a gun to your head or threatening your loved ones. They're not saying, agree or else. In the end, they leave the decision up to you. Third, argument is not deceptive. Everything is on the table. Everything can be examined. They want to convince you, of course, but they're not trying to trick you. When someone does you the honor, and I mean that, of arguing with you, part of what they're saying is that you, your mind, your intelligence, your judgment matter. Someone who argues with you is saying, here are the reasons that convinced me, the best I have. I hope you see them the same way. But in the end, she leaves the final judgment to you. And that is why, part of why, argument is a good thing.